the Chinese government, censorship is about power and control. But for some Chinese censors, censorship is about a lack of options and surviving. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. China is notorious for what you can't find there. Let's say, for example, you want to do a Google search, or look up a Winnie the Pooh meme, or kick back with the movie 7 Years in Tibet. Chances are that you can't do any of those because all of them have either been banned or censored in China. Good luck watching China Uncensored. The same goes for certain numbers that appear together, like 6 and 4, no matter how they appear together. And even the letter N was censored for a time as well. So I assume China was more into PlayStation than N64. Overall, China is completely in a league of its own when it comes to large-scale censorship. On a regular basis, the Chinese authorities heavily scrutinize books, movies, and news stories before they're released to the Chinese public. That is, if they're released at all. At the same time, they've basically detached the internet in China from the global internet in a setup known as the Great Firewall. It's kind of like their other Great Wall, only instead of keeping out dangerous invaders, this one keeps out dangerous ideas like freedom. The firewall blocks Chinese users from accessing non-Chinese platforms, thereby restricting them to online spaces where the Chinese state has oversight and sway. This system is so comprehensive that it was described earlier this year by Freedom House as the world's most sophisticated internet censorship apparatus. Freedom House? Congrats, you just got censored too. The Great Firewall enables the authorities to, for example, automatically censor thousands of words and phrases related to Chinese leader Xi Jinping, and made it possible for them to add 500 extra to the list in the span of just 2 months in 2020. And good thing they did that, because can you imagine the destruction it would inflict in the very heart of the Chinese nation if names for Xi like the driving in reverse emperor and the Tsinghua graduate were allowed to stand? The damage would be unfathomable. Xi acts like someone who once lost a rap battle and has been traumatized by insults ever since. In the end, all this censoring is about maintaining control so that the Chinese leadership can sleep comfortably and powerfully at night. And to ensure this, there is an army of censors or content auditors currently employed to run the Chinese censorship machine. By 2013, Chinese state media reported there were around 2 million of these. That's about 500,000 more than the country's active armed forces had on its payroll at the time. Because forget invading forces, the real threat to China is someone actually seeing an N64. And with the authorities having repeatedly ramped up censorship, the number of censors has only increased. As one anonymous ByteDance employee put it, this is just data from 2020. Since the end of the pandemic, the sense of national secrecy has grown, public agitation has increased, and so we would only find a continued upward trend in hiring of internet auditors. Now, you might think that these censors must be a collective of hardcore enforcers, hell-bent on carrying out the will of their communist masters. But it turns out that many of them are actually just regular people trying to survive. A growing number of censors have spoken out publicly about their work in recent years. And one of them, Wang Jiakai, told the independent magazine Mangmang for a story last month that being a censor is really about just trying to make a living. The way he sees it, it's a job just like that of a cab driver, a programmer, or an employee at a state-owned enterprise. Like many Chinese people today, censors struggle to eke out an existence, with interviews revealing that most of them make somewhere between $560 and $980 a month. Given that a lot of them work in China's major cities where living expenses are higher, such a salary range can be difficult to survive on. But on the bright side, despite the low pay, at least it's a horrifically demanding job. Li Wenbin, a political auditor at an internet platform, told Mangmang that in a previous job, he needed to focus on 60 to 70,000 pieces of content every day, while he had to work overtime on days with heavy online traffic and anytime sensitive topics made it into the international spotlight, even though he didn't get paid extra for it. 60 to 70,000 pieces of content a day. That's almost 1 per second in a 20-hour shift. Even the most Instagram-addicted teen can't doom scroll that fast. Lee eventually got fed up and decided to change jobs. Instead, he took a position as an auditor at a short video platform, hoping the change would improve his prospects. Things only got worse. Auditing video turned out to require more concentration than auditing of graphics that he had done in his previous job. On top of that, every second he spent away from his station at the new workplace was recorded by camera. You were away for 2 minutes? That's 120 pieces of content you could have censored. Even when he went to the bathroom, he would be fined if he didn't change his work status to away. Because shockingly, higher-ups at the Orwellian censoring job don't respect personal boundaries. Monitors being monitored by other monitors sounds like a great place to learn about trust. Generally, censorship offices don't exactly have what you would call a pleasant environment. Content auditors have described them as places where mistakes and omissions are punished by immediate dismissal and where there is no room for compromise. Because of this, Wang Jiakai said that everyone at his work was very nervous and afraid of making mistakes. Working in fear, censors often take down thousands of extra posts online to avoid the risk of anything slipping through. Because better safe than sorry, fired, hungry, and homeless. But the extensive censoring they carry out can leave some deep mental wounds. Chen Zheming began working as a censor in 2020, and soon after, the government's draconian zero-COVID policy came into effect, causing immense suffering for millions of Chinese. During that time, Chen went through countless videos posted on Chinese social media by desperate people locked down in quarantine asking for medicine, begging for food, and pleading to go to the hospital to receive treatment. Imagine being forced to watch Requiem for a Dream all day, every day, and considering that a vacation from the footage you normally have to watch. Afraid to get in trouble with his superiors, he deleted all of them, explaining that at that time I felt like I was doing evil, but I couldn't help it. It was my job and I had to do it. While horrifying, that's actually the most accurate description I've heard for working for the CCP. The nature of Chen's censorship work during COVID brought him to the verge of a mental breakdown from which he still has not recovered. Today, he suffers from sleepless nights over 10-day stretches each month. However, had Chen followed his moral compass and refused to censor, he would have most likely gotten in trouble with the higher-ups, while someone else would have removed the videos eventually. So the choice is to do evil or go hungry, and no evil will still be done anyways. Honestly, I'm glad to hear he's not more distraught when those are his options. Now, to be complete, not everyone feels weighed down by the job of cutting people off from their voices. Wang Jiakai, for example, sees his job as a censor as a positive thing. The way he described it, becoming an internet auditor on political issues means filtering out information that could harm the country, ensuring that the nation is stable and peaceful. In my view, this is no different from the ancient generals who helped the state and the king suppress rebellions. My job is about assisting in maintaining order in the nation. Meanwhile, another censor who scaled the wall and experienced the internet outside of China's borders learned about what actually happened at Tiananmen Square, only to be completely flabbergasted that China was censoring it. According to the China Media Project, after watching many videos, he suddenly realized that this was what had happened. Students had protested, threatening national security, and the government had moved in to suppress it. All as might be expected. What was the big deal? He couldn't wrap his head around it. But for many censors, the job takes a heavy toll on multiple levels. It's stressful, unpleasant, and soul-crushing. The gloomy circumstances of the profession were summed up by an auditor at the social media platform ByteDance. There's no hope in this job. All it can do is keep us from starving and help us get a foothold in a big city. With so much negativity and distress associated with being a censor, a question immediately comes to mind. Why would any person take such a job in the first place? Unfortunately, in today's China, many don't have other options. Also, I assume all the negativity around being a censor gets censored, so they may not know what they're getting into. The Chinese job market has been rocked by government crackdowns in areas like the tutoring business, the healthcare sector, and the tech industry, affecting millions of jobs and destroying billions worth of value. At the same time, China is still engulfed in a multi-year-long property crisis, while government debt is rising and economic growth is faltering. The CCP is to their economy what a chainsaw is to soft tissue. Unsurprisingly, all this has been followed by a recorded rise in economic pessimism among Chinese people, since, no amount of censors can completely block reality. In response, the Chinese authorities have announced large stimulus measures to try to restore faith, but so far, these have done little more than provide a temporary bump for Chinese stocks. Reportedly, the situation has gotten so bad recently that even Chinese bankers are giving up their careers in finance, with some looking for employment in education and even stand-up comedy instead. Do you have any idea how bad the economy is when stand-up comedy is your plan A? 2 drink tickets, I'm living like a king. For young Chinese graduates just starting out on the job market, the situation is even worse, as youth unemployment has stayed elevated ever since China emerged from the COVID lockdowns. But in this deflated job market, guess where there's been a massive growth in employment? Go on, guess. You can do it. Yep. Censorship. Following the COVID outbreak in Wuhan in 2019 and the strict lockdowns that eventually followed, Chinese authorities and internet companies started to hire legions of auditors to monitor an increasingly desperate and frustrated Chinese public. Most of the censors I've talked about here were pulled into the profession during this hiring spree. And that was only after they failed to secure jobs in other more lucrative fields, like stand-up comedy. Chen Jiming, for example, said, "If I hadn't found this job, I might have worked elsewhere. But to tell the truth, I didn't find anything else." Although Xi Jinping has called on Chinese young people to have faith in the Chinese Communist Party and work hard for the Chinese state, it's clearly not ideology and passion that's driving people towards jobs in the country's massive censorship apparatus. It's desperation. I assume when job recruiters ask candidates where they see themselves in 5 years, the number one answer is, "Please, God, anywhere but here." And they remain desperate even after securing the job, as the low pay, the environment, and the unethical work take a heavy toll. We've often talked about the millions of people that suffer under the Chinese government's authoritarian rule, but it turns out that many Chinese enforcers are also miserable. Unfortunately, not everyone can follow in the footsteps of China's bankers and look to stand-up comedy for a new career instead. Not just because no country can absorb millions of comedians, but also because the Chinese comedy scene has been decimated by censorship since last year. This is what cancel culture actually looks like, all you American hacks. And I should know. I've been censored in China since before getting censored was cool. Now, before YouTube kicks you to some random video, check out the latest episode of my show, Deep Thoughts While Gaming, about why being a Sigma male is actually pretty lonely, according to the new Mario and Luigi Brothership. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.